Today's daf is daf Yud Zayin, and we'll begin on the top of the daf, the second line. Al harishona hu omer bisha'ana es Avram v'chule. So the Mishnah says that on the fourth bracha, which we add to the tefillah of a Taanit tzibur, we recite Misha'ana es Shmuel b'mitzvah, Hashem shomea tza'aka. And on the fifth, so it seems clear from the Mishnah that we mentioned Shmuel b'mitzvah, and on that extra bracha of Shmuel b'mitzvah, we conclude with Shomea tza'aka. However, with regard to Eliyahu, Bahara Karmel, Mishana Eliyahu es Eliyahu Bahara Karmel, we end with Shomea tefillah. So with Shmuel in mitzvah, it's Shomea tza'aka, whereas Eliyahu is Shomea tefillah. And these are two different categories and classifications of prayer. There's prayer which is called tefillah, and there's prayer which is called tza'aka. Tana, the Brisa records, Yesh machlifin tza'aka l'Eliyahu u'sfila l'Shmuel. Instead of Shomea tza'aka as the chasima for Shmuel and Shomea tefillah for Eliyahu, it's just the reverse. It's tza'aka for Eliyahu and tefillah for Shmuel. So the Gemara asks the following question: Bishlei magabi Shmuel. In the bracha that we mentioned with regard to Shmuel in mitzvah, you could say Shomea tefillah or Shomea tza'aka. Both lashonos could be logical. Because it says with regard to Shmuel both a lashon tefillah and tzivbei lashon tza'aka, and therefore you could be chosein either with the lashon tefillah, as we saw in the Brisa, or with the lashon tza'aka, as it says in our Mishnah. Ella legabe Eliyahu tefillah tziv. We only have a pasuk of tefillah because in the Ma'aseh of Eliyahu Bahara Carmel, when he gave tochacha to the Nevi Baal, and he said Hashem Elokim, and the Eish came down from Shemayim to demonstrate that God is one. It says in the Pasuk in Malachim Aleph, Pasuk Yifes, Aneni, Hashem Aneni, V'yadu ha'am hazeh, ki ato Hashem Elokim. There's no lashon tefillah. It's only a lashon of Aneni, which is mashma, a lashon of tefillah. So even though Rashi points out, it doesn't say tefillah explicitly, but by implication, Aneni is a lashon tefillah and bakasha, so that makes sense. And tza'aka lo ksiv, we don't find tza'aka. Tza'aka is a more profound crying out, a supplication that comes from the depths of one's heart. That we don't find with regard to Eliyahu. So how can you justify that second Mishnah that has tza'aka of Eliyahu? Where do you find tza'aka of Eliyahu in the pasuk? And the Gemara answers, Haneni Hashem Haneni could be considered tefillah, but lashon tza'aka, it also can be classified as tza'aka. It's something that comes, again, as we said, from the depths of a profound supplication. The Mishnah says, Al Shishis hu omer mishon es Yonah, Al Shviyis hu omer mishon es David ve'Shlomo b'no b'Yushalayim. So the Gemara is worried about the chronological sequence. It seems to be off. Yonah basar David u'Shlomo. Yonah Hanavi was later than the period of David u'Shlomo. Like time of Makdim Liberation. Why is it that the sixth bracha, which is really the fifth, is Yonah, and then only afterwards, when we get to the next bracha, which is called the Shvius, but we know it's the sixth, it's David u'Shlomo. Why reverse the chronological order? My time of Makdim Liberation. Why was Yonah put first? And the Gemara answers because of the Chasimos. And they wanted to establish the Chazal that the final Chasima of this entire section, this unit of 6 brachos, would end with a certain Chasima that would point us in an exclusive way to the tefillah of David and Shlomo. What was the chesida they wanted to conclude for all these brachos, the entire unit? Baruch atah Hashem merachem al haaretz. And this means that it's a tefillas tainis to be mispal for Hashem, that he shed rachmanos on the land and be Moshiach with the geshamim that should come down. And therefore he mentions in this bracha, David Shalom, they were mispalel on the Aretz. And therefore, since they wanted to be Chosem, they delayed the Misha Ona as David Shlomo until the last bracha, so that it integrates thematically with the Chasim. Now, what does it mean that David and Shlomo mispalel for the Aretz? If we look in Shmuel Beis, Perikaf Aleph in this case, there was a Ra'av, there was a famine for 3 years, and David was mispalel during this Ra'av, as the pasuk which Rashi quotes Vayhira of Bimei David, Shalosh Shanim, Shana Achrei Shana, Vayivakesh David es Pnei Hashem. Tosfos points out that David was mispal during the time of a Magefas. It says Vayimet Sham David Mizbeach Hashem, Vayala Losu Shlamim, Vayatar Hashem La'aretz, Vate'otzer HaMagefa Me'al Yisrael. So David's tefillah was accepted, and the Magefa was terminated. Shlomo also was mispalel, and this was in Malachim Aleph Ches at the time of the establishment, the dedication of the Beis Hamikdash. He was mispalel called Sarah v'Shamata El Tchinas Avdecha v'Yamcha Yisrael Asher Yispalu El Hamokom Hazeh. And Shlomo gets very specific as he goes on in his tefillah that Hashem should hear and hearken to their prayers when there's Atzirus Geshavim and Ra'av. As it says, Be'ya'otzer Shamayim V'lo yeh matar ki yechtu lecha Yispalu el hamokom hazeh Ra'av ki yeh ba'aretz. So since both David and Shlomo were mispal on Eretz Yisrael, therefore the Chasim of the Bracha Baruch Merachim ala Aretz would specifically relate to the tefillos of David and Shlomo. Tanu, we learned in a Brisa, Mishum Sumchus Omru, and Sumchus has a different nusach with regard to the last bracha, and it's Chasima, Baruch Mashpil Ramim. God, you have lowered those who are very high, which means that by stopping the Geshamim, God is sending a message to the people. They have to do tshuva, they have to machnia themselves, be mashpil as Ramim. And the Ritva asks, this is not a chasima l'tova. You say machpil ramin, that's really a chasima for the opposite of tova. And therefore, he says that David nisromim b'mesha bikesh lamod al minyonim shel Yisrael v'davar zeh hu migovel lev ladas kamakoch v'chalpa v'huchpal al yidei shenasa magefa. And Shlomo was nisromim when he declared Bnei Bano Banisi Beis Zvul Lecha, and therefore HaKadosh Baruch Hu was mashpil, and this has to do with a Gemara in Gittin about Ashmedai. And basically, what we're praying for is that by being mashpil the game, you've accomplished Hashem exactly what you wanted to, and therefore this could be a termination of the drought. The Mishnah says, Shalosh Taanit Rishonos Anshe Mishmar, those who work in the Mikdash for an entire week, Misanim v'lo mashlimim. They will fast, but they will not complete the fast. They will break their fast before Shkia. And then the Mishnah goes on to say that there's a din of Shtiyas Yain for the Anshe Mishmar and also for the Anshe Beis Av. The Anshe Mishmar are permitted to drink wine at night, but not during the daylight hours, whereas the Anshe Beis Av are not permitted to drink wine, neither by day nor by night. And we're going to have to see that the Anshe Beis Av were kosher for the Avodah at Laila as well, and therefore the Isser of Avodas Migdash of Yain v'Sheich al Peish Atov Banecha Itcha Bevam Bevoachem El Olmoid will apply even at night. Tanur Rabbanu, we learned in the Brisa, Ma Omru Anshe Mishmar Utarim Lishtos Yain Bal Leilos Avalo by Yomi. Why is it that the Anshe Mishmar, who will have a day out of a week, so they are dedicated to the Avodah for 1 week, they won't do the Avodah for the entire week. No single Kohen will get more than 1 day's Avodah because the Mishmar was subdivided into Batei Av, and each Beis Av would get that day of Avodah. So the Gemara explains that the Anshe Mishmar are, in a sense, excuse me, in a backup position. It could be that during the course of the daylight hours, when there's a heavy responsibility of avodah, because most of the avodah was done by day, then it might be too overwhelming for the Anshe Beis Av. We need a backup, and that's going to be the Anshe Mishmar. Yavo, the Anshe Mishmar will come in, the Yisayu Lahem, and they will contribute to lessen the burden on the shoulders of the Anshe Beis Av. However, at night, the Anshe Mishmar are allowed, they're permitted to drink wine because there are no karbonos at night. And even though, as we'll see, there is avoda of Evarim and P'torim and Aktorah even at night, but for that, we can rely on the Anshe Beis Av. Because at night they were mala, the Evarim and the P'torim that fell off the Mizbeach. Also, if they didn't complete to be Makdir, the Evarim and the P'torim by day, they finish it at night. Also, they had a requirement of Haficha b'mazleg, es Evarim shelo nisaklu. They would have to turn over the basar on the H if it was only equal on one side and not on the other side. They would be ma'amar haktaros. Now, once we've seen that the Chachamim were machmir and the Iser Shtiyas Yayin, even with regard to the Anshe Mishmar, were not serving on that day. And the reason for that is because we're afraid, we suspect a chash that maybe we will need them to help out the Anshe Beis Av. Let's derive from that the Iser of Shtiyas Yayin could apply even Bisman Hazeh, even after the Churban Abayis, because there's always a suspicion, a chashash, a possibility, Shema Yibana Hamikdash, in Mirza Hashem, B'meir V'meinu Amen, and then they will have to be ready for the Avodah. And I would suggest that when the Brisa tells us that Mikana Omru Kol Kohen, even Bisman Hazeh, Shemakir, Mishmarta, if he knows which Mishmeres, to which Mishmeres he belongs, to the Mishmeres Beis Av Shalo, he knows exactly which Beis Av within the Mishmeres he belongs to, he knows which day and which week he is meant to do the Avodah, because the weeks and the days were always designated for the certain specific Mishmeres and Beis Av. So if he knows exactly which Beis Av he belongs to, then, and Yodeh Shabbat Avosav Kvuim Sham, he knows that going back all the way to the beginning of the Beis HaMikdash, there was no psul in his zera, so that he's a Kohen that is royal avoda. Once he gets that status, also lishtos yain kol otso yom. On that day, which is designated for him, to do the avoda, we have to consider that the mikdash will be built and he will have to be royal avoda. And therefore, on that particular day, even Bizman Hazeh after the Churban, he will be enjoined from drinking wine. And it would seem that this halacha is not based on what we call statistical probabilities or possibilities that the mikdash will be built. First of all, there's a gigantic machlokas as to whether or not the mikdash is going to come down from Shamayim, Be'esh, and it's already built. And therefore, as soon as it comes down, we have to start the avodah. There's another man, the Yomi, who says, no, we have to build the Beis HaMikdash ourselves. There are those who try to reconcile the two. And that although the Mikdash will come down from on high, we still have to join and finish and complete the Beis HaMikdash. So we'll get the mitzvah of the Asuli Migdash, of Binyan Beis HaMikdash. It won't just be taken away up to Shamayim. But in any event, if we assume, which is certainly the Rambam Shita, that the Mikdash has to be built by the Mashiach, by human efforts, then it's not going to be built bang overnight. It takes a while to build the Beis HaMikdash. So there'll be plenty of time for the Kohen to prepare himself. And if he's intoxicated or he drank a Revius Yayin and he's not intoxicated and he's prohibited from doing the Avodah, he'll, in quotation marks, sober up. I would say that this is not based on statistical probability, and it's a chash that maybe the Mikdash will be built and he won't be Roy Mikdash, the Avodah, because he's drunk. I think there's a din here. This is halacha. And they gave the Kohen a shame, Mishmeres Beis Av, as far as Isur Shtiyas Yayin, on that day that the Mishmeres Beis Av is designated for the Avodah. Other days of the week, it's mutter. Why? Because he knows his Beis Av and he knows which day of the Beis Av. So that's a poter and a matir as far as the rest of the week. But we're dealing with a din. We're not entering into the question of reality. Will he be able to be royal avoda? This is a din. They gave him a status, a chalot shem begavra of Mishmeres Beis Av, and as such, he is enjoined from drinking wine. The Brisa continues. What about a case where he knows his Mishmeres, but he doesn't know his Beis Av? So the Beis Av, we said, was the knowledge of the Beis Av that Yom is a matir for the rest of the days of the week. He doesn't have the matir, the case where he only knows his Shem Mishmar, he doesn't know his Beis Av. So therefore, in such a case, the Makir Mishmarto, the Ein Makir Mishmeres Beis Av Shalo, and again, Yodea Shabbat Avosov Kfurim Sham, and he knows that there's no Psul Kahuna in his lineage, then also still Siyan Kolos and Shabbos. The whole week he's enjoyed from drinking wine. Again, they gave him a Shem Mishmeres as far as the Isur Shtiyas Yayin is concerned, and that applies to the entire week. Had he known which Beis Av he belongs to, that would be matir the rest of the week, and the Isur would be limited to that day in which his Beis Av would serve in the Mikdash. But if he doesn't know the Beis Av, then the entire week is included in this prohibition. Now the Brisa continues with a third din. If Eino Makir Mishmarta U Mishmeres Beis Av Shalo, he doesn't know neither his Mishmeres and certainly not his Beis Av. However, the Yodea Shabbat Avosov Kfum Sham, he knows that there's no psul in the kahuna of his zera, of his lineage. Also, Lishtos Yain Kol Hashana. It means that the knowledge of his Mishmeres is a matir for the other 51 days of the week. But if he doesn't know which is his Hachi Mishmeres, then because of the Safek, which is the week of his Avodah, we generate an Isur Shem Mishmeres Beis Av for the entire year. Also, Lishtos Kol Hashana. In other words, we don't know the week of his Mishmeres, and the we don't know the day of his Beis Av, and if we have to prohibit Mitzad Safek, this whole Isur and Shem Gavra is generated by Safek. And that now spreads throughout and encompasses the entire year. Rebbe Omer Ani, I would agree with you fundamentally, also Lishtos Yayin Li'olam, meaning that Mikra Din, I agree with you that this Safek generates an Isur and a Chalot Shem Kohana Oved for the entire year, every single day. Aval Ma Es, I disagree with you in the entire proposition because Takanoso Kalkalos. The heter of the Kohanim to drink yain is a result of the kalkala, the fact that many years have passed since the Churban, it hasn't been rebuilt yet, and there's no chalos safek that would generate the Isur yes, yain. Omar Abai Kiman Shasu Ha'idna Kahani Chamra Kirebi. We accept the Shita of Rebbe, and that's why Kohanim Zmanazeh are allowed to drink wine. We learned to the Mishnah Anshe Mishmar Anshe Mamad Asurim L'Saper U'Lechabes U'B'Chamishim U'Tor B'nei Kfar Shabbos. Those Anshe Mamad who are standing over the carbon, they're being mispal that the carbon should be Ola L'Rotza, talking about a carbon tzibur, and Asurim L'Saper L'Chabes. During that week, they are not allowed neither to take a haircut nor to launder their clothing. My time of why? Rabbi Bar Yochanan, there's an Easter for the Kohen to do the avodah if he's in a state of nivul. Nivul meaning he's detestable in his appearance. He's wearing begadim that aren't clean, or his hair is very long, and therefore, since they would aser taking the haircut or washing the clothes for that week, that would guarantee that the Kohen would take care of this before that period of time, so that by the time they got to their week of avodah, they were also very beautifully groomed, and their clothing were beautifully laundered. Tan Rabbanan Melech. Now the Gemara goes off on a little bit of a tangent. Once you're talking about haircuts, let's talk about the Melech, the Kohen Gadol, the Kohen Hedjot. The Brisa says the Melech mistaper b'chol yom, Kohen Gadol me erev Shabbos le'erev Shabbos, Kohen Hedjot achas l'shloshim yom. So let's go through these three dinim. With regard to a melech, the Brisa establishes that he has to take a haircut on a daily basis. The Kohen Gadol every erev Shabbos, once a week. On Fridays, Kohen Hedjot once in 30 days. And the Gemara now gives the reasoning for each of these three categories, these three dinim. Melech, mitztaper b'chol yom, my taima, Omer bi Abba bar Zavda, Omar Kro. We derive it from a pasuk in Yeshaya HaNavi. Melech biyofyo techezena einecha. The melech has to be with a hidur, a yofi, a splendor, without any sort of nivul, anything that's detestable in his appearance in front of the people. So they shouldn't be mekil in mora klal. So it seems that this is a doraisa halacha, though there's a pasuk in Divrei Kabbalah in Nach, but nevertheless that pasuk in Nach reflects on the din of Mora, that Mora, which is an Isser essay, generates a chiyuv on the melech to make sure that the people will not violate this Isser essay of being mekil in Mora melech. So it now becomes a chiyuv and a kiyuv on the melech himself. Kohen Gadol le'erev Shabbos my taima. The Gemara offers a svara, not a pasuk. Omer Rav Shmuel bar Yitzchak, Hoel u'mishmaros mischadshos. Shabbos, that the new mishmeres comes in on Shabbos, and the new mishmeres should have a certain level of awe and kavod for the Kohen Gadol, who should appear in a beautiful way. And apparently there's this kiyum kavod with regard to the Kohen Gadol, a special kiyum kavod, and that's mechayev the other kohenim ha'ovdim. I'm not sure if a kohen who's not Oved is included in this particular dimension of the Chiyuv Kavod Klapi Kohen Gadol. Obviously, all the Kohanim have this Chiyuv Kavod vis-a-vis the Kohen Gadol, but that specific dimension, meaning the way that the Kohen Gadol should appear, that is limited to the way he should appear in front of the Kohanim Oved. Finally, we get to the third law, Kohen Hedjot Achas L'Shol Shinom Minolan. And here again, the Gemara is looking for a pasuk as opposed to a svara. Asya, we have Gzeres Shava, pera minozi. The word pera appears in the Parsha of Kohanim and also in the Parsha of Nozik. Siv Hacha, with regard to Kohanim, and this is a very interesting Gzeres Shava because it comes from Divrei Kabbalah to Divrei Torah. That's unusual. And maybe it's more of a Gili Miltza than a specific, strict Gzeres Shava. It says in Yechezkel, there's an entire chapter that's dedicated to the Kohanim and their laws. That's Yechezkel Mem Dalet. V'rosham lo yigalechu upera lo yishalechu. And the Mefarshim say, pera lo yishalechu, hainu shalo yigdalu se'oram pera. They shouldn't have sa'ar that's pera. It sounds like it's an Isur on the Kohanim of pera lo yishalechu. Uksiv hasam. And again, we have to derive the number 30 days. We'll see that in this Gzeres Shava, because with regard to Nazir, there's an Isur Giluach, which is just the opposite, the flip side of what applies to Kohen Hedjot. Kadosh Yeh Gadel Pera Se'ar Rosho. He is enjoined to grow his hair and make it a pera. He is not allowed to cut his hair. And Malahala, just like a Nazir, who is required to grow his hair, and Gadol Pera is a kiyum of Gadol Pera as a reflection of his Kedusha. Shloshim, he has to grow his hair 30 days, and the Gemara is going to derive that from Halacha in a minute. Afkan, so too in Kohanim, where there's an Isur Legadol Pera, that Isur is Shloshim Yom. So again, we have an Isur B'divrei Kabbalah that's derived from Yechezkel, and it implies that any Kohen, even if he's not a Kohen or Oved, is included in that month's worth of make sure that you take a haircut within the month. So there shouldn't be any Gidul Pera. And again, it might not be an Isur B'divrei Kabbalah. It could be that the Divrei Kabbalah is only reflecting on the Doraisa Halach. I don't know. The Gemara doesn't quote a pasuk Doraisa other than the pasuk by Nazir, who's required to grow his hair for 30 days. But Nazir Guf Minolan, from whence do we derive that a Nazir himself was obligated to grow his hair for 30 days? Now, I don't think this is an umdara, but Das had noted that when he took his neder to be a Nazir, he took it for a 30-day period. Although, again, he could add and expand the days of his Nazirus, he can even be a Nazir Olam. But nevertheless, when the Gemara asks Minolan, it implies that we need a source in the Torah for this halach of Shloshim Yom, that Stam Nazir Shloshim Yom. Omakra, the pasuk says in regard to Nazir, Kadosh Yeh Gadel Pera Si'ar Rosho, and the word Yeh is now being interpreted based on a gematria. Yeh b'gematria Tilson Havi. So Yeh, because you have the two yuds, is 2 times 10 is 20, plus the 2 hays is 5 times 2 is 10, it's 20 plus 10 is 30. And therefore, Stam Nazirus is Shloshim Yom. It sounds like it's halacha in Nazirus. In a Kabbalah's Nazirus, it's got to be Shloshim Yom. It'd be very interesting to know whether or not a Nazir could be Makabel Nazirus less than Shloshim Yom, whether that would come under Masna al Masechet Kosus Batorah and Tno Batan. Amalei Rav Papa Abai. Rav Papa raises the following objection to the derivation from Nazir. Maybe what the Torah has in mind when it says Upera lo yishalechu, which is the pasuk in Yechezkel, shelo lirbu klal. That means that he shouldn't let his hair grow at all. And it means that he would have to take a haircut on a daily basis. And the question is, what are we doing now, Rav Papa, with the Gzeira Shava from Pera Pera? And Tosas Dira Maskal Lo asked that question. Lo lirbu ad shloshim el yigalech b'chavtes. In other words, the Gzeira Shava is teaching me that for sure there's a separate Isur of Gidul Pera with regard to Kohen Hedge that we derive from the pasuk of Lo Yishalechu, Pera Lo Yishalechu. But as far as Pera Lo Yishalechu is concerned, that Isur would be violated if he went a full 30 days without cutting his hair. But if he cut his hair on day number 29, then he avoids the violation of Pera Lo Yishalechu. However, Rav Papa is adding another element into the equation, that from the pasuk in Nazir, when it says, the pasuk in Yechezkel with regard to Kohen, when it says Pera Lo Yishalechu, there's an additional halacha that he should be cutting his hair on a daily basis. As far as the violation of Pera, that he would only violate at the end of the 30 days, and that we derive from Nazir. But nevertheless, there should be an obligation to cut his hair on a daily basis. Sheistapru b'chol yom. Amalei, so Abai responds to our Papa's objection. Because of, if we would have said in the Pasuk, Lo Yishalechu Pera, instead of Pera Lo Yishalechu, we would have said the verb first and then the noun, Lo Yishalechu Pera, then Kiddukamet, we would interpret it the way you would interpret it, and he would have to cut his hair on a daily basis, and then the Pasuk would be implying that Lo Yishalechu Pera. However, pera lo yishalechu, that the word pera comes first and then lo yishalechu afterwards. The implication is pera lehevi shaluche hu de lo l'shalchem. When his hair can become pera, it means after 30 days, then he should not continue to grow them beyond that. And he should not have his hair grow more than 30 days on that day when it becomes pera. So the Gemara asks the following question regarding this Isser of Kohanim, that they're not allowed to let their hair grow more than 30 days. Why don't we apply the logic of the Tanakama of Rebbe, who says that even Bizman Hazeh, the Kohanim are prohibited from drinking wine, so that they be roy. If the Mikdash is built, they'll be suitable to do the avodah. And here too, make sure that you cut your hair with at least once minimum within 30 days. That's how we should adjust the Kohanim. And therefore, the Kohen will be roi, he'll be suitable to do the avodah. Because we have a hekesh between Paru Rosh and the Isur Shtiyas Yayim. Ashtu Yayim Bisman Bia Hudi Asur. Anytime he enters into the Mikdash to do the avodah, he's prohibited from being Shasu Yayim. Shalom Bisman Bia Shari. But if he's not coming in to do the avodah, then he's allowed to drink the wine, at least on a doraisa level. Is Af Hochanami, here too, there's no Isur of Gidol Seir unless it's Man Bia, but Bisman Hazeh, it's not called Man Bia, and therefore they're mutter. So the Gemara now asks for Tanya, don't we have a brisa? Rebbe Omer Ani, at Kohanim Asurim Lishtos Yain Liolam Avoma Esesh Takanosa Kalkulos. So Rabbi Kiman Shasu Idna Kohani Chamra is Kirebi, is Michlal, and here we turn to Daf Yud Zayin Amid Beis Dirabanan Asrei.